Okay. All right. So as I said, photography in another light. That's what we'll talk about. This picture here was taken on the golf course right over here in Deerwood. And that's the kind of thing you get from infrared. Uh, Typical stuff is the black sky, dark skies, very contrasty black and white pictures. If you like black and white, you don't have to go black and white. We'll talk about the different styles, in a little while. Credit where credit is due. I've been shooting infrared probably since the early 2000s. Started off with a Nikon D70 using this Hoya R72 filter, which is, we'll talk about it later too, is a 720 nanometer filter on a regular camera. I enjoyed it a lot. I didn't understand a lot of what I was doing, but I enjoyed the results I was getting. And it was about the last year or two, I discovered this guy called Rob Shea on YouTube. I really highly recommend that you go look for him on YouTube. He's got 60, 70, 80 videos on YouTube on infrared, nothing but infrared, on everything you can think of. He's a really good guy. I mean, we'll go through this workshop here and I will cover 1/100th of what he covers in some of this stuff. So Rob is really good. I'd recommend going and looking him. A lot of the content in this workshop probably came, whether I realize it or not, from him, because I've looked at so many of his YouTube videos. So I'll give him credit for a lot of stuff. And in fact, I have a couple of his videos embedded in this presentation. So let's talk about what we're talking about here. Let me get rid of that overlay there. Okay, we're going to talk about why do infrared photography? Why do IR? We don't have a lot of people here because obviously they don't understand why doing IR. They probably don't say, well, my bird pictures are pretty. Yeah, they're bird pictures, so they are pretty, and I'm not taking anything from that. But this is another kind of photography. What is it? So we'll talk about what infrared photography is, what the different cutoffs are, lenses, things like that. So we get into styles, what different infrared styles are, the equipment that you need to get to those styles, the shooting process to shoot infrared. It's only difficult if you're shooting with an unconverted camera using one of these kind of filters here. If you're using a converted camera, you shoot just like your regular camera. So we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about post-processing. And post-processing is a big part of infrared. Whether you don't like post-processing, it may turn you off, but there's ways to get around it. There are ways to get around it, okay? There are quick steps. If you use Lightroom, for example, I've got a couple of, Rob Shea has a bunch of these one-step actions. So you click, boom, it's done. Sort of things like that. So that you can get those kind of things. So why shoot infrared? That house is a picture of a house in Galveston. It's a nice house, but it sure looks different, doesn't it? It's very ethereal looking place, and infrared does give you that ethereal sort of look. So I think if IR can be part of your journey to become a better photographer, as you get into it and start understanding light, meters, cutoffs, processing, all that stuff, you learn a lot about photography itself. So it's not a waste. It'll get you into areas that you may be uncomfortable with, like post-processing. It'll force you to see light and color differently. When you look at a picture like this of a house in Galveston, you've got to look at it in infrared. You've got to realize the trees are white, and it's going to look different. And the skies maybe there's a little blue in the sky. So things start to look differently, and you start to see things sort of differently. If you're a black and white photographer, a street photographer in black and white, you start to see black and white. You start seeing things in tones of black and white. Infrared's the same thing. I start seeing things, and the sun's on those leaves over there. That's going to be beautiful. It's going to shine real bright white and things like that. So you start seeing things differently. And so it'll give you new ways of looking at monochrome images. The infrared and monochrome is fantastic, especially with some of the higher cutoff filters that we'll talk about. And I think, to me, it reignites my love of photography. Going out in Kingwood and looking at what I've looked at for 30 years and taking an infrared camera out and looking at it that way, wow, different. I go out in the trails and take pictures of things I've taken pictures of for 30 years, but now they're different. And the nicest thing is infrared photography works best in bright sunlight. So when your other camera is sleeping, you go on these photo tours with people. I've done it. I went last year, a couple of years ago, up to Monument Valley. You go out early in the morning, take sunrise pictures, and about 10 o'clock, you're back in the hotel. And you're in the hotel until about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and then you go out for the golden hour. So the middle of the day is dead. That's when infrared works. That's when you take your infrared camera and you go out and everybody else is sleeping and you're taking pictures. In the middle of the summer, when you get it's a terrible time to take pictures. The sun is beating down. Nobody wants to go take pictures in midsummer here in Houston. I know it's hot, that's a problem. But infrared works great for that time. So infrared in the bright sun, midsummer, you're golden. You know, that's the infrared golden hour, if you will. Doesn't mean you can't take night shots. You can take interior shots. You can. I've done that. It's just that when you get these nice white trees and all that's when it's bright sunlight. That's an interior shot in Galveston. So what is infrared photography? That was shot with a 590 nanometer filter, and I'll show you later. That's inside the bishop's house, I think, in Galveston. Now, the reason it looks curved like that is I used a fisheye lens. I like the distortion in the fisheye. I wasn't trying to get rid of the distortion. I was trying to make it. So I stood in. This fisheye looks at about 180-degree angle. So I almost stood right in between the door frame so that it would curve around me.
It's great.
So it's a nice look. Shooting. So what is infrared? It's shooting where color doesn't exist. And what do you mean by color doesn't exist? Color exists and it's everywhere around us. We see it, right? So colors. There's green grass. I can see it. No, color doesn't exist actually.
I agree. I know what's that.
No, it doesn't.
I've studied it and studied it.
It just does not exist. This is the spectrum, electromagnetic spectrum, right? You get up here, there's infrared. It's longer wavelengths. You get down here is visible light. This is what we see between about 400, 700 nanometers. Nanometers is the measure of the wavelength. It's in millionth of a meter. So 700 nanometers is longer, of course, than 400. But this is our spectrum of what we see. And of course, below that is ultraviolet. Now, when we talk about color doesn't exist, I just mentioned to you Rod Shea, and this is a quote from his book, Color. Okay, it's a pigment of your imagination, is what he says. Color is a pigment of your imagination. The palette of your personal conscious experience. When light with wavelength of 400 to 750 strikes a color, the cones of your retina, your electric signals interpret that as color. So color exists in your head, not out there. All right, and so it does. Color exists only in your brain. So the inverted spectrum hypothesis suggests that two people could see the same color and have the same vocabulary, that's red, but actually we're seeing different things, different colors, because our brain interprets it different. And you never know that. There's no way to say that, because we both insist that's red and we'd agree it's red. You might be seeing what I see red as green and mine be seeing whatever, but so we don't know that. But it is something that our mind invents. Okay, so what happens? So that's just it's an interesting concept because he uses the term here at the very last sentence, is all color false color. Okay, false color is a concept in infrared photography because the colors you see in infrared photography, like the blue sky or the yellow trees or the red trees, is false color. It's not really color. It's color that you create through post-processing from the information in the digital camera. So how does a regular camera work? Okay, a regular camera works by having a filter placed at about 700 nanometers, 720, 750 nanometers, that cuts off infrared light and gives you the visible light. Without that filter, your camera's not going to take pictures very well. Your camera's built to take visible light pictures, right, with color. You don't want this infrared to come in, and your sensor will pick up infrared light. Now, so that's what you typically see. If I put a cutoff filter on that camera that cuts off visible light, for example, if I installed this 720 nanometer filter on my regular camera, it cuts it off, cuts the visible light off because it's very dark. You can't see through that, right? But what it does let through is the camera does let a little infrared leak through. And the older cameras and the ones without a very good cutoff filter will let some through. So it means there is some infrared coming through. So if I set that camera up and shoot for 2 minutes, I'm going to get enough infrared in to expose that sensor. Okay, so you can shoot with a cutoff filter like that for infrared. So, so the upside of this approach is that it's cheap. You buy a filter, you put it on your camera, and you go out there and it works. Okay, and it works real well if you got a good camera. I've shot my Nikon D810, which is about a 38 megapixel camera, good landscape camera. I shot it this way, and it works. It works well. You know, the downside is that it only works for 720 above. So there are some filters we'll talk about that are a little lower than this for infrared cutoffs you can't use for this kind of purpose. But 720 is what most people think of as infrared anyways, okay? It takes long shutter speeds because there's very little light reaching the sensor, okay? Because the sensor has an internal cutoff filter for infrared already, it just doesn't cut it all off. So that's sort of the normal camera shooting. That's what you see in the light spectrum. If I go to converted cameras, okay, this little camera here is one I bought. I'm showing this to the lady on Zoom. is a Canon ELF 180, I think. I bought this. It's a full spectrum converted camera. By full spectrum, it means they just removed that internal filter that blocked infrared and replaced it with a clear piece of glass. And now this camera can take everything from infrared all the way down through color, the color spectrum, right? This without anything on it. This has nothing on it, right? So that's a nice feature. It's a very flexible camera. I can do anything with it. This is the most flexible alternative. You can shoot throughout the range depending on the external filter. You always have to, this comes with several little filters that I can put on it. Depending on which filter I put on, that'll give me a different style, okay? I can put a cutoff filter on it that'll cut off infrared, and by golly, it turns it back into a regular camera, right? They took one out, I can put one on. Now I got a regular camera, right? Or the other way around, I can put one that cuts off visible light and gives me infrared. Now I'm back to, now I got an infrared camera, okay? So it's this little camera here, which was cheap and inexpensive and fits in my little pouch next to me here. When I travel, it's sitting right here. I pull it out. I see something, hey, that looks really nice and infrared. I've got my camera here. I really highly recommend that. It doesn't take the best pictures in the world, but if you've got Topaz denoise and Topaz gigapixel and all these things, you can make a beautiful picture out of that. Okay, so you can fix it up. It does take good enough pictures. I just showed John one before the class that I took in Europe. It takes nice pictures. So the cons are the con of a camera like this is that you always have to have a bunch of filters with you because it doesn't shoot without filter. You can, but the picture is very lousy. You have to have some filter on the camera. So you're going to have a camera with a filter on it all the time. Now that's not bad because these little filters here fit in this little case too. So I've got this with this one camera with 3 filters in this little bag next to me all the time. Okay. And since I shoot mostly 720, that's usually the filter that's attached anyways. But those are the pros and cons. Filters can get expensive. And if you're buying a lot of filters, that cost can stack up. There's Chris.
I need a reminder to set a reminder.
You did get a reminder from John. Okay.
I was editing.
Okay. Sorry you missed a little bit.
Are you recording?
Yes, I am recording. Yeah, just a little bit. We're just talking about, let me just go back to this. We were talking about what the infrared spectrum is, right? And Chris, being a regular photographer, understands some of this. You actually you shot.
I shot film.
Yeah, film. You shot infrared film. So okay. So, but as I explained on this thing here, the visible light spectrum, that's where color exists, because color doesn't exist outside. The color is an interpretation. What your mind, that quote there from Rob Shea, he calls it a pigment of your imagination. Color is what your mind interprets wavelengths as. So when you get outside of this spectrum here, you don't see infrared. Therefore, there's nothing to interpret. There is no color over here in infrared. There's no color in ultraviolet because it's in the head. Okay, so your mind doesn't see that. So why that's important is that if you're shooting with a regular camera, as I said, Chris, you have a cutoff filter, hot mirror filter, whatever it's called. It cuts off the infrared light. It lets a little through, but that's important because you can take pictures with that. But that's a normal camera. And then if you want to, you can install an infrared filter in that camera that cuts off visible light. For example, this Hoya R72 will do that. And if you look at through the R72, you'll see a screen on it.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, well, it cuts off visible light. So there shouldn't be any light coming through. If there's light coming through that, then it's not cutting it off, right? So it is letting infrared through though. So that's what this is here. As a result, it's like putting a heavy ND filter in front of your camera if you're using an unconverted camera. And so your exposure times could be equivalent of what that might be as a 10 to 15 stop ND filter. Okay, very dark. And so you can use that. Downside, of course, is it only works with 720 and above. Your unconverted camera won't work on some of the lower cutoffs, and we'll talk about what those cutoffs are in a second. A converted camera, on the other hand, will take the filter, that cutoff filter out, replace it with a clear piece of glass, and you got something called full spectrum. That's what this camera is. It's full spectrum.
That was
Okay.
your first.
That was my first one was actually my D70, but this is my first converted camera, and I bought this at Life Pixel or one of those cameras. This one is a full spectrum conversion. It has to work with external filters. That's the only way it works. So I bought a little set of these filters that go on it, and I've taken some really great pictures on it. A full spectrum camera, if you can install an infrared cutoff on it and turn it into a regular camera. So if I want to do that, I can actually install an external hot mirror, and it's a regular camera again. So that's one way to do that. The other way around, of course, is to install an infrared filter that cuts off visible light. Now you got an infrared camera. So the ultimate flexibility.
What you go on the other side.
Yeah, this one is not full spectrum. This one's 590, and we'll talk about that in a second. So that full spectrum gives you the most flexibility. You can go stay real or regular. Now here are the different styles and the different cutoffs. Cutoffs are in terms of nanometers. All right, starting at the bottom here. That's the longest wavelength, called deep infrared 850. Okay, and I've got an 850 cutoff filter myself. That's one of the filters I use. It's so deep infrared, it's so far out of the color range that the only thing you can shoot is black and white. Now I say that, this is the raw picture on the right here. The raw picture is sort of purpley ugly. This is raw. If it were white balanced as a JPEG, it would look more like this. Okay, so if you're going to shoot JPEG, you can white balance in camera and probably come out with something closer to this kind of thing here. But this is the raw image out of the camera, purple. And the processing for this is pretty simple. Turn this black and white, period. Just convert this to black and white, and then do your adjustments on it that you might want to do. For example, you might want to highlight things, dodge and burn, whatever stylistic things you want to do converting. But deep infrared, the conversion process is simply turn it black and white. You have no other choice. Okay, these get to be more fancy up above. Okay, so as I move up here, the standard infrared, second one up, this is the raw picture on the right hand side. This is a house in Galveston. This is the processed picture. This standard picture, the hallmark of that is, again, the light blue skies. There is some color. Why are we starting to get color now as we move into 720? Because if you look at the spectrum, the visible light spectrum goes to about 740. Okay, and we're picking up the very top of the spectrum at that point, a little bit. Okay, so now you're starting to get a little color in the picture, and people like that. So and you can turn this black and white too, and it looks great. So you can shoot this one in black and white. It looks fabulous.
It wouldn't be as contrasting.
No, but knowing post-processing tricks, as I'm sure you know, then you go to Lightroom, you select sky, you take the levels adjustment, or you take dehaze and slip it over. So I'll show you some of those tricks in a moment here. Yes, but you can make this thing look almost exactly like that. But the hallmark of this is a very contrasty black and white. I love this when I'm taking architectural pictures, city pictures, downtown buildings like that. It is really cool. This one is just a very pretty look. How else can you say it? It's soft, pretty colors on it. And the second one up, 720, which is I call standard infrared. Then the third one up, I call super color. This is what I've got my Sony camera converted to. Okay, this one is 590. It's letting more color in, right? It's moving into the visible light spectrum and just letting some more visible light in. So it gives me the opportunity to get some really crazy trees and some still blue skies and still a very different look. Here's the raw image over here, sort of purpley blue trees. And we'll talk about color swap in a while where we get this look here. But that's part of the post-processing. Yes, post-processing gets a little more heavy as you get into this area here, right? So if you're not happy with post-processing, sometimes as you move this way, So that's another, and there are styles in between those styles. There's more than just this. And then at the very top, Chrome. Chrome is actually a dual band bypass. It's allowing light in from two areas of the visible and infrared bands. Most people that make this, they're trying to copy some film that Chris used to use. And it's very secret as to what wavelengths they're letting in and what wavelengths they're not. I'm not sure what wavelengths those are, but that's taken along the paths back there toward East End Park. All those palmetto trees back there they're bright red in that picture. So IR Chrome is a style, and IR Chrome is this little blue lens here. It's funny how a blue lens turns everything red, isn't it? But there is that is the IR Chrome thing. So that's gives you an idea.
I think that super color though, you could make a nice black and white.
Oh, yeah.
Easily that too. It wouldn't be quite as bold as
Yeah.
out of the car.
What we start getting into is a very good thing. Let's talk a little bit about it now. The pro cons of some of these things, and I'll get into the pro cons as we do this. But yes, if you've ever processed black and white, it's advantageous to have color in the black and white because you can now individually by color raise or darken or lighten different areas of the picture. So yes, you can make a nice black and white out of that. Actually, all of them you can.
Yeah.
Infrared, all of it tends to sometimes be nice and contrasty anyways, and it gives you. But there's a lot to play with here. Basically, that's what I'm saying. Infrared, there's a lot to play with. I chose to go with a 590 here just because I can use this with no filters on it. I mean, no external filter, and I'll get pictures like this here. If I want, I can put the 7 with those. I've got filter adapters. These filter adapters. I can get my old 720, which I used to use with my Nikon, and stick it on the end of this thing. Now I'll get a picture like this one here. So the thing that I've learned is you can, if you've got a lower nanometer or like a 590, you can put a higher filter on it because you're cutting off higher, but you can't put a lower one on it because you've already cut it off. I've cut it off. I couldn't put a 420 on there. So there's like 420. I couldn't put a 420 on it. It wouldn't work. I can put a 720 on it. I can go off. So that's good. The other thing to know is that if I do like using my normal camera and getting long exposures, so I can get silky water, or I can get the sky with the clouds streaking through the sky, which looks really neat with a long exposure, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. If I want an ND filter on my infrared camera, a normal ND filter doesn't work. Okay, you can use a 15 or 20 or 30 stop ND filter, and it won't work because you're looking at infrared light. Infrared light goes through that like nothing. It's not an ND for that's an ND filters work with visible light. Okay, now so there are ND filters out there. You have to buy them for infrared. So there's infrared ND filters. Okay, if you want slow exposures. Okay, so that's something that I learned. I didn't know that. I learned that about a month ago. I was arguing with some guy on Facebook about long exposures, and he told me I was wrong, and I certainly was. You need a special ND filter for infrared. Okay, but that gives you an idea. Just looking at that, sort of the styles. I opted for a conversion a little higher because I knew I could put these kind of filters on it. If I had opted, say, for a conversion to 720, I could never get that look if I decided to one day. Now, most people, I shouldn't say this because it's too judgment. Most people seem to like the standard look and the black, and a lot of people that shoot infrared shoot monochrome, black and white. A lot of people do. So that's the styles. This is a detailed list of the styles from my friend Rob Shea's book. And he talks about all these different styles here like this and what they look like. You can see there's different things. And I have some asterisks next to some of these. The asterisks basically say that for an unconverted camera, it doesn't work. Okay, converted cameras work at 720 and above. I mean, unconverted cameras. You can put an external filter on an unconverted camera, 720 and above. It won't work for these lower ones here. Okay, so if you want to try with your regular camera before you make a big jump and buy a camera, I would suggest buying something like this Hoya R72, attaching it to your camera, getting a really good tripod because you're going to need it because it's going to be long exposures, and then go and try it. You know, go in your backyard and shoot some shots. And then we'll talk about the post processing. But so that's it gives you an idea. There are a lot of different styles. I showed you some on the other page. Okay. Equipment. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more pro cons again, and we're going to go through that. quickly. These, on this slide, I do have two sites I recommend here. One's called Kalari Vision.
We take a screenshot of that, or do you have a?
Oh, I'm gonna give you a PDF.
But,
I'll give you a
would be
PDF.
good, because there's some of those other.
Yes.
Things that I'm gonna look into too, because you went way further.
Yes.
And the fact that color doesn't exist, that I understand the brain part.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing, because it makes us realize that there's stuff in front of us we don't see.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not just color, it's other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
so.
Anyways, if I don't remember, remind me, I intended to turn this into a PDF and send it to you. So the whole thing. No, I guarantee these classes.
I mean,
My guarantee to you is money back guarantee. And I always tell people, but I'm not joking. If you leave this class, you came to the class, you got a question, call me, okay? Please, okay? That's my guarantee. If you didn't get it in class, I'll try to help you get it after class, okay? So these two, Kalari Vision and Light Pickles, I've used both of them. They're very good. I think I got this little camera here from Kalari Vision. I can't remember. And I think this is Light Pixel. I may have been the one that I converted my Sony with, but they'll do both of them. And they sell cameras on site, so you can already converted cameras. So if you don't want a little one like this, you can buy a brand new Sony A7 IV converted if you wanted to. If you really want to go big on the thing, it's not going to be cheap, but you can do it. You can buy a Canon R, whatever it is, if you want to. They have them. So if you want to go big on this thing, you can. I'm not that rich. This is my crochet here. So a normal camera, we talked about, it works with an external filter. The pro cons, it works above 720. It's inexpensive way to begin. Now, the DSLR versus mirrorless, it's the next point down here, is interesting. DSLRs are more difficult to focus with. And why is that? Because a DSLR uses, was it phase detection, a focus? It focuses using optics, okay? A mirrorless camera focuses on the sensor using something else here. What was it called? Anyways, it focuses on the sensor. So the point is, since cameras are built for visible light, if you're using a DSLR, the focusing is always going to be off, because infrared doesn't bounce off things the same way regular light.
Well, back when I was shooting with an SLR or
Yeah.
even when I had a Leica, they had a little R that was offset on the focal
Okay,
line.
there you go.
And you would focus for what you saw, and then you go, oh,
Yeah,
over to
yes.
the R.
That's exactly what
And
this is.
Yeah, it was designed, they had figured out on the lens where to do it to make it focus for R.
Exactly, you know, exactly right. So if you do want to shoot with your old DSLR, you can do that, but just realize your focus is going to be a little bit different. So I would suggest going to using the back mirror, the back little screen.
And that one I ended up buying.
Yeah.
It has a mirror. Well, I'm gonna get it just.
Yeah.
That, but it has.
Yeah.
So that can.
Yeah, well, the mirrorless, I still shoot to this day. I don't have a
Yeah.
mirrorless camera. I do, well, these are mirrorless, but my regular shooting camera is a D810. That's an old
Right.
camera, probably 10 years old or 8 years old or something. It's a fantastic, I love it. You know, it's not a problem. Yeah. Yeah.
About scaring somebody.
So- So there's, my recommendation down below is if you're going to, it's best to use a mirrorless camera. Focusing will work better because they use contrast detection, I guess is the term down here, contrast detection. There's just a little interesting couple of videos. I'm not going to show you the whole video, but we'll just a little bit here.
If you've ever been intrigued by the images, I'd like to show you just how easy they are to create. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to shoot and edit infrared images with your existing DSLR mirrorless camera. And that you can modify them to take surreal infrared film.
So the point is, and here's a video like that. So you can get in there, he'll show you how to shoot with your regular DSLR. Okay. So if you want to get in there, Rob's got a picture. I think, and then this one I thought was interesting. I'm sorry the volume is down. I got this up as high as I can
I'd
get
like
it.
to discuss infrared photography. In this video, I'll show you how to shoot infrared images with an iPhone. What equipment you'll need, what settings to use when shooting, and how to track this. Look at this. If you like to shoot infrared with the camera that you always have on you,
So, okay, you can shoot with an iPhone. Let's see if I've got my little,
Get another filter?
No. that's a
Oh.
filter. These see these filters here that I got for this camera? This clips onto my iPhone, okay? And so I can get that infrared filter, flip it onto here, and I can take pictures with my iPhone, okay? They want to go cheap? You want to go cheap? That's 200. Now, I guarantee you they're not going to be quite as good. It's a bit of a hassle getting that filter, try to on the right lens and the right spot. And then there's a little light leaks in here sometimes. It ain't perfect, but if you want to do a cheap quickie thing, yeah, you can do it, okay? And go to his video, look at it, okay? So I'm just telling you don't have to spend $1 trillion to do this, okay? So for the, I do have a little clip-on filter for my
Well, the
iPhone.
only thing I find with getting adapters for phones is when you get a new phone, they move the camera. Like mine, my LG, it's got like the bar.
Yeah, well, this
Different case sticks
this-
out,
this-
but no, it's the way to do it.
this will work because that little hole in,
Yeah.
all I need to do is get that little hole.
And put it over.
the right lens.
Right.
And then just
Somebody came up with.
Yeah.
So they just put a filter on it all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Okay?
You gotta figure out the blank lens.
Yes.
Yeah.
I always have it over the wrong lens. I've done that and I'll look through here and said, I got this edge going over here. So I'm moving this around trying to figure out which lens it is. Yeah, it's possible. It is possible. I've done it. Well, if it's in this cheap, what can you say? If you want to get into it, you're not sure about it. You can buy one of these little things for about $30 maybe or something, and you buy that little clip on for another 10 and you're all set. You're rock and rolling now. So we'll look at this video. Look at Rob Shea YouTube. Okay. My own equipment is sitting here on the table, and converted cameras. These two are converted. Of course, your normal cameras with the hour filter removed. You can have an old camera converted, or you can purchase one. So this one's purchased. This one's converted. Okay. So I've got the Sony's converted. The little Canon is purchased. Purchased.
How much that purchase can and how much do those go for? That's a current,
This one is
a one shot or
yeah, this is a point shoot, and it shoots only JPEG, and I recommend you shoot RAW, but because you shoot this JPEG, you have to white balance in camera. We'll get into post-processing. White balance is extremely important in infrared. Why? Because you saw those strange colors, right, on my raw pictures, purples and reds. That's outside the range that Lightroom. If you try to put that in Lightroom and hit the white balance thing, Lightroom goes all the way to the edge of the white balance, and it can't figure it out. So there's a little trick to get it to work. But if you're shooting JPEG, the plus is you white balance in camera and you're set. The minus is you're shooting JPEG. Now I'll, for example, if I'm shooting a 720, what is white in 720? Trees, right? So what do I white balance against? Grass, trees. So I'll take this camera, take the back, put the automatic white balance, point it at grass and balance. Okay. Now I've done a white balance on grass. Now, okay, the real photographer is going, oh, it's neutral. It's not in infrared, that's neutral color. Okay, because color doesn't exist. If I'm going to shoot one of these other little things like the super color, I would shoot against a gray card or something like this Expo disc. Hold up the Expo disc and shoot against that. Or a gray card. Or if you have nothing else and you're standing next to a sidewalk, color balance off the sidewalk, because that's neutral color. So before you shoot, you don't have to do it every time, but when the light changes, things gets a little different. So if you're shooting JPEG, you white balance in camera, and your post-processing therefore is very minimal. You've already done the major part. So the recommendation again is to convert a mirrorless camera. What I did with this little Sony, it's a mirrorless camera.
6,000.
That's a 6,000, a 6,000. Nice little camera, and it's got these two lenses. It's got a telephoto, and it's got the regular lens. And then I bought a fisheye for it just because I like crazy looks. So I would say, go ahead.
Put a filter on the front.
which is good fish.
Oh, you can't. Well, I guess you could. I mean, you could find one. No, the only, if I shoot fisheyes, they're always gonna be 590, the
Right.
camera. But that's right, that's right. So I convert a mirrorless if you're gonna do it. I'd say that, because it won't have the focus issues. And prefer it, and then if you have a camera that'll shoot raw, that's better too, okay? So let's go on. Oh, this pictures of my stuff. It shows the typical picture. This little Canon. I shot some really great shots with them. One of my greatest, some of the really fun shots that I had a lot of comments on Facebook and others. Was shot with this little silly cheap camera. Okay, and then this is the typical look for my my Sony camera without any filters on. This is 590. Okay.
Quite frankly, to get started, to get
Yeah.
a camera like small one.
Yeah.
Shoot the JPEG.
Yeah.
Learn
That's
what's
the
going on.
that's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is. It is, and that way you. Yeah. Well, I mean, and the I showed you, I did a white balance for you when you were here. You see, it's not a big deal. Once you not understand the camera, you go back here, you click, you go to white balance. It says hit menu to white balance. You point at whatever you want to white balance on, hit the menu, and your white balance is done. Now you can shoot. Okay, and if I change to another filter, I'd redo it. If I've got this with me, I usually hang this around my neck. I just point this up the sky and white balance against that. It's like using a gray card. Right. Or if I don't, I forgot it. This?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is an Expo disc, I think they call it. I don't know if they exist anymore. That's been around for so long. You can shoot on against the sidewalk or something like that. That'll
Well,
work.
it reminds me of lightning. Can't tell the spot movement.
Yeah,
I have one.
basically that's what that is. I mean, you just hold it up like that against the bright sky and shoot against it. It's like shooting a gray card, basically. Anyways, that's my equipment. That's the results I get from it. I like it. Let's talk about lenses, and this is where the problem starts, because lenses are built for visible light. Okay, so lenses can be a problem. Lenses are designed for visible light and may not work well with IR. They end up with hot spots. You can see that little yellow discoloration right there. That's this lens here in Galveston. Okay, so this lens will hotspot, and this one will also. Okay, so they will have hotspots. Some lenses are worse than others and only show up at higher f-stops. I found out if I open this lens up to like f4, f whatever it is, I open it up as wide as I can open it, I don't get the hotspots. If I stop it down to f16, f20, forget it. I'm going to get a nice yellow hotspot in the middle of the camera. Yeah, yes, yeah. This guy's a good straight man. Vintage lenses work better because of the coatings in them. The vintage lenses don't have the same coatings that modern lenses have in them, and those coatings cause problems. Okay, the hotspot, because infrared reacts differently in the lens and bounces around things differently, diffracts differently, and all that stuff than regular light. Okay, so prime lenses tend to work better than zoom lenses, and smaller f-stops, wide aperture works better than stop down. So I do have a problem with these lenses here, but I get around it. I shoot a lot of pictures, and once in a while I get back, I get a great shot, which I go, damn, there's a hot spot in the middle of it. Like, I didn't see it, or sun flares. Sun flares are another problem. You get a lot of flaring and hot spots. It's just, it is. There is a infrared lens database. Go to Rob Shea again. Go to Rob Shea's. There is also LifePixel and those sites also have a lens database. They'll tell you which lenses are better than other lenses. Okay, and they'll tell you some lenses don't use this lens, and sometimes but I've used lenses. Like I said, I used my old Nikon D810 before I even knew about hotspots, and I was shooting for years with it. Didn't know about this until recently. And I don't know. It's not a major problem. They are hard to fix though. If I went to black and white with this, it wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah.
And the trouble is sometimes it's not only just the coloration. It's not just the coloration. It's it's a little lighter too. So sometimes you get like a hot spot. It'll be a lighter spot in the middle of the camera. So lenses can be a problem. their lens databases, I didn't worry too much about it when I converted this, and I've been pretty happy. I get what you see in this picture sometimes, and I just deal with it. I mean, I'll figure out what to do. And some pictures I have to throw away. But yeah, just I try to shoot with the thing wide open or as open as I can most of the time. You sacrifice depth of field and stuff like that. But if you're shooting with a wider lens anyways, depth of field is not going to be that big a deal. And I'm not shooting David Emerson's bird pictures. I have to see every strand of the feathers. Okay, I'm not that kind of photographer. If I can see the window in that building, I'm happy. So infrared equipment filters. We just talked about filters here. We can see the little pretty colors on these different filters. There's a blue one here, there's a red one. So these different filters. You can buy them online. I think, and I said this is an opinion, it's nice to have a little color visible in the picture, just because you can do more with color. You don't have to. So 590 or 720 filters are nice. 720 gives you that soft look. The 590 gives you that super color look. But you can always put a 720 on it if you want to go. So the little color is nice to have there. So I think unconverted cameras will need to cut off the 720 or higher. We talked about that. Converted cameras, you can use filters, any filter higher than the one the camera's converted to.
Sure. If you were shooting with the super color, 720.
Or it's 59, 590.
Oh, 590.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you wanted to have that more muted color, couldn't you just go in with saturation? Or something?
Well, yeah, you could, except that if you go back to the super color is going to give you yellow trees, for example. And with what you do in Lightroom is you select that tree and take saturation down.
Right.
Yeah, you can make it look like a 720, so pretty close. Yeah, that's right. Okay, that's right. We can show you that in a second. But you're right. You can, yeah. That's good. And then ND filters. I just have this in here. Something I learned probably a month or two ago. Unconverted cameras, they have long exposure already built in, right? If I put this big 720 on here, you can't see through that. There's no way you can see through that. So that's an ND filter in itself. But if you have a converted camera, it sees right through that. I mean, I put that on there, the camera just sees right through.
Yeah, you were showing me when I saw you on the bike.
Yeah.
Back of the camera, you can see fine.
Oh yeah, I mean it's pretty nuts. If I you can see the camera here. Sorry, the person online. I'm just showing the camera. You can see it's 590. If I put this in front of it, okay, it'll still see through it. You know, as dark as that is, white is just picking up.
Yeah.
So it's just seeing through that. But if I put that in front of a regular camera, flat. Okay. So that that's just a fun fact. Shooting in IR, we don't have to get into this. So you guys who know shooting, it's like shooting with a very heavy ND filter if you're an unconverted camera. So you're going to have to do things like set up ahead of time. Before you attach the filter, you might want to focus, or you can focus using the little display in the back, the LED display in the back of the camera too, with the filter on. Yes, if it's unconverted, you better tripod now, because your exposures are going to be conservatively a minute or maybe. Yeah, because a converted camera, I can just pick this up and take pictures, click, right? I mean, I can just, even my iPhone to some degree, iPhone will slow down. It'll take a 1 or 2 second shot. So iPhone, you probably would be nice if you had it on a tripod, right? If you're going to do an iPhone. But your regular camera, I mean, they can go up to like 3 or 4 or 5 minute shots.
It's like shooting with a neutral density.
Yeah,
so you're gonna have to do that anyway.
So I won't get into how to shoot with a neutral density filter, but if you look at that picture, that's what it is. It's a neutral density filter. So what I'm telling you to do is do like you do with neutral density. Before you focus, possibly before you put the camera up, you're gonna have to guess at your exposures. Why do I say that? Because different cameras have different sensitivities to infrared. So if I put an infrared visible light blocking filter on it, so all the camera's seeing is infrared. My old D70 had a really lousy hot shoe filter, so it let more infrared in. So I was able to shoot at 30, 40 second exposures. If I go to a more modern camera, has a better internal filter, it's going to block out more infrared, but it's going to make longer exposures. Yeah. So you experiment. Some people, go to 2 minutes. Some people be able to do it in 1 minute. You just try different exposures of the camera and see what comes out. Okay. Converted camera, just shoot like you would any other camera. Okay. It's pretty easy. That's a picture downtown Houston, standing at the post, right? So my opinion is everybody loves trees in infrared, white trees, yellow trees. This is the 590. This is to get yellow trees. Skies are always fabulous in infrared. So everybody likes the trees and the foliage. I like to include foliage in my picture because it does, like this picture of Houston, it sets it off. But do something else, put something else in the picture, buildings. People always look like Martians in pictures, but that's okay too. They always yell, and 590, if you have people in it, there's cars down here. People always look like they're wearing yellow clothes. Everybody looks like they're in a uniform. It's interesting. When you take pictures, everybody has yellow clothes on. It's like, what is this? It's interesting. So my opinion is, take some organic material in the picture, foliage, bushes and stuff, that's good. But if you can include things like old buildings and things like that, scenery, it really helps. I like skies make or break any picture, especially
Very autumn look.
if you like autumn. Look, well, if you want to shoot that in chrome, those would be red trees. So
So, yeah.
It's other world.
yeah.
Because then you've got those, the sky just looks like it's colored, the buildings look
Somewhat normal. Actually, they're not. Yeah.
Process and goes, this is beautiful, but it doesn't understand why.
Yeah, it's different, and even the buildings aren't quite the color they really are. Yeah, so it's yeah.
So unbelievable, that picture, because you never assume that this has a certain type of filter on it unless you're a photographer.
Yeah, and you get things like buildings that reflect the sky and stuff always look cool in infrared.
Did you have a hotspot?
No, I didn't. There's no hotspot on that one. I didn't. If this thing is opened up, the f-stop, it doesn't really give me a hotspot, and that was taken with this little Sony. Okay. Anyways, and try monochrome if you want. Try night shots. Yeah, infrared works best. I was talking earlier before you came, Chris. Why shoot infrared? The best time to shoot infrared is when nobody else is out shooting. Midday, midsummer, hot sky, bright, everything. Everybody's, my God, I'm sleeping until golden hour. No, you're out with your infrared camera taking pictures. That's the when you want to do it. But you can't take night shots. I've done that. You can take interior shots. I showed you the one of the Bishop's Palace. So you can do that. This is down at this is the Woodlands. This is a monochrome picture of the Woodlands. I've seen those pictures 100 times, but to me, you look at infrared, it just looks different. It looks neat. There's a nice look to that thing. You could go down there. The difference is, of course, these trees would all be dark. You could still have a black and white picture that's quite nice of the Woodlands, but with all these dark trees, it just doesn't pop the same. Yeah.
Or that, and I found this is true with cameras. Cameras show you the truth of what. That's how I see it.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't see this. I'll take a picture of it or look at something in the mirror upside down.
Yeah.
Actually see things you don't see, but the branches within.
Oh, yeah.
Pop out like crazy.
Oh, absolutely.
So it looks like you got clear leaves.
You'll see it as well here, but some of the tree pictures, I love the dark black trunk with the branches coming out with the white leaves. Yeah, you see the tree. You really see the tree that way. I like that. I know what you're talking about. This one's a 720 shot, the wildlife trip we took up. This was an abandoned motorcycle, but it actually looks pretty good. So it was very shiny and all that. I thought, well, who abandoned this? But it is abandoned. There's pieces of it that aren't in the gas tanks, not on stuff. But editing IR is what we're going to get into next. It's heavily dependent on. The looks are heavily dependent on post-processing, unless you shoot JPEG, as we talked about, in which case the camera does a lot of the work. There's no right way. Remember, we talked about the term false color before. Well, what you see, and this is all false color, it's made up, right? The color's in the head. So in infrared, when we post-processing, we post-process to a state of getting false color. Typically, you're striving to get blue skies and things like that. But you don't have to. People will process and leave them with yellow skies and things. I mean, I've seen different approaches. I'll be using Lightroom and Photoshop, and I can show you some quickly. Editing black and white, especially above 720, is simple. You just turn it black and white and do your thing. Or if you've got silver effects or something like that, you use that. So, okay. But there is no right way. I'll show you how to edit And there's a lot of help. People like this Rob Shea have actions for Photoshop and have presets for Lightroom that are simple one-click edits. They're pretty simple. So if you own Lightroom, that's pretty good. The typical steps you go through for infrared photography. Okay. John Gray will recognize that little gazebo there.
Yeah.
It's down by your house somewhere, isn't it? So that's down by your house, Royal Shores. I took my granddaughter there to take some sort of senior pictures and things like that. It's a nice little place to go. I didn't do them in infrared. So this is this is the raw picture here. Okay. And you can see in Photoshop, this is Photoshop. I'll show you Lightroom in a second. So I started off with a raw picture. I went into image / autotone, okay, and I got that picture, okay. It doesn't always work the same on every picture, okay, but this is sort of the theory here, okay. Now I got blue trees and a yellow sky, okay, and a little bit of a hot spot. You see that? Okay. So that's one step. The second step in Photoshop is do something called a channel swap. And I'll show you what that is. There's two methods of doing that. One's called, if you know what the channel mixer is in Photoshop, you know what that is, Chris. You go channel mixer. There's RGB, red, green, blue. So I go to the red channel and I make that blue. I go to red, I make red 0%, I make blue 100%. So I've made blue the red channel. I go to the blue channel and I make that red. So I just swapped red and blue channels. That's all I did. I'll show you in a second. That's one way of doing it. The other is called the invert method, where you go to Photoshop, you copy the layer and then invert it on top of itself and do color blend mode, which inverts the colors. So I'll show you that in a second. So that's Photoshop. There's two ways of inverting. So the typical steps are, in Photoshop is autotone and then channel swap. And you have to channel swap in Lightroom too, but there's a real simple way of doing it. Then use Camera Raw to white balance. So here you go. Here's the first one. Now you've done the autotone, you've done the inverted layer, but you can see that the bricks and everything going here, it's still sort of blue, right? That walkway is sort of blue. So I go into Camera Raw or Lightroom and take the little eyedropper, white balance eyedropper, and click on the walkway, and all of a sudden I've got white balance. This is now gray. The other colors change because that's what white balance does. It defines for the computer what is neutral and everything else in relation to that. So now I've color balanced, okay? You'll notice that in this particular one, the trees are almost a little reddish and stuff. Most of the time I get yellow trees, but I say it never works the same. And then once you've done that, you look on the hot spot. So yeah, this picture is okay. You can get rid of that. There are ways of getting rid of it, but it's very laborious. Not fun to find hot spots in your pictures. Okay, Lightroom slightly different. Okay, so Lightroom, I come up. This is like golf course, Deerwood. I took a similar picture. You shoot raw. Then white balance in post-processing using a separation to get false color. You create or download a color profile. So if I were to try to white balance this picture in Lightroom by using a eyedrop tool, it would max out. The little slider would go to one side or the other, but it couldn't go far enough. Lightroom doesn't have the range to white balance this. You can get the range in things like Capture One and some other software, but Adobe software doesn't have the range. So what you do, if you know what camera profiles are in Lightroom, every camera has, Lightroom has, if you're shooting with a Canon or shooting with a Nikon, if you go to profiles, and I'll show you in a second, your camera will be identified there and they'll give you different profiles for your camera, like scene, whatever, they have different scenes. Well, Rob Shea has created camera profiles for about 100 different cameras that you can download that are infrared profiles, so that you go in there in one click, you apply the profile first. So first of all, you go in, you get the raw picture, you apply the profile, and then you click on whatever's supposed to be neutral. In this case, it's the clouds. It's the only thing I could find, white. Okay, and now I've got that blue against the clouds, and then I do a color channel swap or color swap. Okay. Where I get the blue clouds. And then Lightroom, you can say, well, Lightroom doesn't have RGB channel swapping abilities. There's a trick Again, a raw trade trick that allows you to do that. I'll show you in a second. And then you, of course, edit it to however you like it, So that's the final picture there. Okay. So you get something ethereal and interesting looking, and that would be a neat golf course to play on with yellow grass. Look, try to find a golf ball out there. Anyway,
like black balls.
yeah, some different colored ball, probably. Anyways, it's fun. It's fun. I sometimes on Mondays the golf courses are closed around here, so if you like to walk, I do. I walk Deerwood a lot of times on Mondays because the course is closed. I'll take off and walk around the course. Take this little camera here a lot of times with me. This little Canon. So that's it. I talked about camera profiles? Okay. There's a bunch of them, and there's an instruction that Shay has on his website on how to install a camera profile on your on Lightroom. If you're in Lightroom, it's pretty simple. Okay. You pick up, you download the pack, import using second download pack, and then import into Lightroom using this kind of thing. It's edit, import, develop profiles and presets, and then find the file that you downloaded from Shay and click on that. Boom. Next time you bring up your camera, Lightroom, it'll have that profile, just one click, and then white balance. And I'll show you how that's done as we get into it. He also has a book called Color Doesn't Exist. It's 320 pages long, believe it or not. And it's a big book. It's a coffee table book. It's about 320 pages long. This guy knows his stuff, okay? And it's fun reading because it's not 320 pages of packed text. He's got pictures in there and stuff. So it's fun reading. Okay, I thought it was fun because I'm straight. Yeah, it's along the California coast, isn't it? Yeah. Outside, what is it, south of Carmel, isn't it, or somewhere? I don't know.
Drive from Santa Barbara to San Francisco.
Yeah, that's right. Anyways, his book is called Color Doesn't Exist, a practical guide to infrared photography. It's a great book. I have it. I love it. You can also join Facebook groups. I joined a Facebook group, and the advantage that you can post some of your own stuff if you like the ego boost, and I like that once in a while. I have to admit it. But you join that, and you'll see what other people are shooting. And that's the thing. You start seeing what they're shooting, and that some things I never thought of doing that way. There was one the other day. I can't think of what it was. Oh, I can't remember what it was, but sometimes you'll see something and say, I never thought of shooting that in infrared, but maybe that's good. That's good. So there's a lot of camera profiles out there that you can get into and stuff like that. I will give you this thing. I won't go through these terms, but this is a little glossary in the back: nanometers, white balance, what white balance means, what a hot mirror is, what false color is, all that kind of stuff. We talked some of these terms in this class. I'll give you this thing in PDF, and if I don't, please kick me. That's a picture of I took in, where was it? I was down in the museum district somewhere. It was down toward Rice, I think. Some of those trees with their, you see the moss on the trees and all that stuff. It's fun what you get with infrared. Something that you walk by every day and say, that's interesting.
Which camera?
Oh, that one is the 590. I get the yellow foliage. So it's this little converted 590. So that was what I got there. And what did I white balance off of? I think I put white balance. I mean, when I edited, I think I played on the wood here to white balance. Yeah, it's fairly huge. And so that's the deal. Here, open up. Okay, recognize Lightroom. I got some sample pictures in here, things like that to show what post-processing looks like. Okay, this is, let's do one in, this is my backyard shot with different cameras down here below. So for example, let me get my glasses on so I can see what I'm talking about. This one is shot with this one's shot in 590 with this little Sony here, okay? And that's shot in ARW, so that's a raw image. So this is the raw image over here, okay? So that's the raw image. That's the processed image there. This one here is shot with the deep IR. That goes only black. Here's the raw image here. That's my backyard. Here's the processed image. And then this one shot 720. So that's the processed image, and that's the raw image. Then these are JPEG files shot with this little camera here. Okay. Yeah, I sat there, it's two different cameras, to shot out the back there. So this one here is shot with a 590 also. It looks a lot like this picture up here. Right? This one's shot with the Sony. This one's shot with this little Canon ELR. That's JPEG. And this is what the JPEG RAW looked like. Now you can see it's different than the RAW from the Sony, because this is raw. This is white balanced JPEG. So the only thing I have to do with this one here is do the color swap to get to here. Okay. So that I do have to do something to it, but it's not a lot. Right. This one here I have to do more to, because I have to white balance because it's all that red in there. So there's some, just to show you there, you get some different things happening going on. But let's go to a typical picture to do a process. I'm going to pick this picture here just because it's an interesting one, and I'm going to go into Photoshop first. Okay, so let me get into Photoshop and show you what a color swap looks like and how you would go about doing that. And then we'll get into Lightroom. And it's really not as complicated as it looks. Photoshop is a little bit more complicated, but I can show you exactly what a color swap looks like because you get the RGB channels. You don't see that in Lightroom as well. I love post-processing. Chris knows that. So infrared is right up my alley. I will spend all day. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that.
I always screenshot it so that I can.
Yeah, you almost need to do that, but sometimes I look back at what to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're looking at this picture here. It's a picture of a little bridge and here with golf course. Can't remember which hole that was. Okay, so that shot, I believe, yeah, that shot with my Sony 590 nanometer without any external filter, just as is. Okay, so that was that camera there, and that's the raw image there. So what did I say do first? To go up to edit, auto tone, right? So edit auto tone second. Is it edit auto tone? Yeah. Image auto tone. Auto tone right there. Okay, boom. That's pretty good. It did a really good job. Okay, so that, and some people leave if you like that look, it's whatever you like, right? So okay, fine. I got some blue trees and yellow sky and stuff. It's not, and I could work with that. What you see on the screen isn't as good as you see here. Okay? It's a little bit better. I could work with that to take some of the looks over exposed a little bit on the grass and things like that. So I could still make that a better picture, even leaving it as it is. I don't think any further, right? But this is if the next thing is typically a color swap. So first of all, in Photoshop, you auto tone and then color swap. So how do I do a color swap? So I'm going to go over to this little thing here. I'm going to go over to layers. Here's the picture layer here. I'm going to go to adjustments, and I'm going to go to channel mixer. Okay, so now I got channel mixer. You'll notice the channel mixer here has red, green, and blue channels. There's 3 channels to editing. That's standard RGB, right? Red, green, and blue. So not surprisingly, I'm on the red channel. The red channel is at 100%. The blue channel and the other green channel are 0 because it's a red channel. So how do I make the red channel the blue channel? Well, that's simple. I go into, I make sure this is red up above. I go into where it says red. I make that 0. Okay. Now I go in, I want this to be the blue channel. What I'm doing is swapping channels. So I make that blue. Okay. So now I've done one swap that I've made the red channel the blue channel. Now I go into, this is the way you used to have to do it all the time. Now I go into the blue channel and make the blue channel the red channel. So I go to red and blue. There. So, well, no, it's okay. So now I've done a color swap, right? I've made the red, I've swapped the red and blue channels. That's called a color swap. There's an easier way to do it in Lightroom. So I just want to show you technically what you're doing here. Okay. This is the way I always did it. And by the way, I have an action, which I call, yeah. Well, if you know how to create actions, So here it is. You see that? You see that? Yeah. Yeah, so what you can do this and this, you can see if you open actions, I can say record an action.
Yeah.
And then I can do it, and at the end say save it. And so it's a tape recorder. See that invert method? That's what that is. Well, that's the invert method, slightly different. The other is the channel swap. So there's two ways of doing it in Lightroom. One's called channel swap, which I just did. The other called invert method. So I created an action for him. So yes, it's not that hard. Once you've done it, next time I come in, I just click.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you're not going to the screenshot,
No.
and looking at the
No.
notes and trying to mimic what you just now did.
Well, the thing is, you don't have to look at the notes if you know in theory. I always tell people that. There was a couple of people in our photo club that always, Chuck, can you, what's the formula? Can you write that all down? I said, no, try to understand what I'm doing. Okay, I'm swapping the red and blue channels. So I'm making red blue and I'm making blue red. That's all I'm doing.
But
Okay.
once you physically do something, I know, understand merging, then you've got,
Oh yeah, yeah.
you know, once you do it, then you
Yeah.
don't have. to-
And the nice thing here is once you do it and record it, you just come next time. I just click on that. So if I want to do it fast next time, I can go back to let me go back here. I can go back to my history. I go back to autotone, right? To where we were before. Now I can go to my actions here and just say channel swap, run it. Okay. So now it's done. So that's a lot easier. Okay. Now there's one other method called the invert method. So let's go back to history. Now, what is the invert method? The invert method, let me go back to layers here. Instead of doing the channel swap, really the results are the same. And if you think about it a little bit and understand blend modes and stuff, you'd understand. But what I do here is I duplicate the layer. I do it by shortcuts, command or command J.
You program your, is it keyboard?
No, that's a Photoshop shortcut, command J. You can also say layer duplicator or layer something, copy, whatever. That's just too long. All I did was copy the layer on top of itself. Then what I did is I invert the layer, command I, and now it's just reverse of itself. So what is it? A channel swap, right? So what I'm now doing is I'll change the blend mode to color. Okay, now I've got the channel swap. So there's two ways of getting channel swaps, and I got an action for that. And sometimes these give you slightly different looks.
Yeah.
So if you don't like the look of one, you can try the look of the other. So that's the inverting in
You
life.
have to throw all the different stuff together. Figure out
Yeah.
which one-
Now, the thing that I would do with this picture, here, okay, before going any further, is I would, let's see, let me go back to here. If I can do that. Okay, I copied a layer on top of it. You could flatten it. Okay, I just copied itself on top because I want to do something with that. Now, see, what I don't like about this still is it's too blue. The walkways are still, I still need a white balance set. So white balancing, I told you, is always important. So what I've done now is I did auto tone, I did the channel swap. Now I look at it and say, I want to do a little white balancing on this thing still. So the way I'm going to do that in Photoshop is easy. I'm not going to use Photoshop. I'll use Camera Raw. Filter, neutral filters, camera raw, camera raw filter. And so I'm just going to go into camera raw, do it. You could do this in Lightroom also. So here's camera raw. And what is, how do you, white balance? Take that little dropper right there and click on something that's neutral. Okay. And now, of course, it's some of it's too light. So this is where I would go and start to do things like, I might do auto just for the heck of it. Auto's good. I might take the highlights just down a little bit. I almost always like a little dehaze, and here it helps the contrast. You can also use a curves adjustment. See what dehaze does there with the sky and stuff. So what I'm doing now is just doing typical last minute edits and then going back. So that's the typical processing of that picture there. And I've got the picture I want. Okay. let's do the same thing with the same picture in Lightroom. Okay, it's going to be a little simpler, but you do have to have those camera profiles, which you have to download. Okay. So let's go back to Lightroom. We'll get rid of this little guy here. Don't save that. Okay, so we started with this picture here. Okay, and we ended up with that picture there. So that the way I would do this in Lightroom is I go to the develop module. The first thing to do in Lightroom is to find a camera profile this goes with. It's only going to work with raw images for cameras that you took. If I did this with an unconverted, I mean a JPEG file, it doesn't work. Okay, it's going to be JPEG's already got profile. The camera already gave it its profile. That's what JPEGs do. The camera implants its profile. This doesn't have a profile. So if I just try to white balance this thing, without applying a profile, I go to basic, go to the little picker tool here, and you can see the temperature is already pegged over here. If I try to click it, it does something, but not much, And then this because this thing is pegged over the side here, it just can't go any further. I can fool around with this thing, temperature and stuff like that, but it's just not going to work. So the first thing you need to do is get a profile. I've got these two profiles here: infrared temperature -100, infrared temperature -50. Doesn't matter which one you use. It's different pictures might use a little different ones. You download these from Rob Shea. You don't have to understand anything else. Just put them on your import them into Lightroom using the instructions I showed you earlier, or his instructions, and they'll show up automatically. They'll just be there under profiles. Okay, so now that you've got this set, I'll just pick this one over here. Oh, that looks awful. I don't want to do that. That's okay. I'll close that. Now I'll do the white balance. Okay, now I've got something I can work with. That's now the white balance. You'll notice here the temperature is not pegged anymore. And you'll notice here that it's giving me a different range of temperatures and stuff. So here's exposure temperature. So the temperature is not pegged, and that's what the profile gave you. So now I've got a profile. Now I got to do a channel swap. How do I do a channel swap? Geez, how do I do that? Well, this doesn't have an RGB channel swapper. It does have something that's pretty interesting though. Let me make this a little littler. This is another one of these little things from Rob Shea that I learned. I was always doing this in Photoshop until he showed me this. Now I do all my processing in Lightroom. Okay, so I go to these masks up here. I pick a linear gradient. Okay, I start outside the picture and drag away from the picture. So I have covered the entire picture with a gradient, right? There's no gradient. If I drag it this way, the gradient's going. So this is the gradient. I'm dragging outside. And I'm holding the shift key down so it's straight down. Okay, now I've got the gradient. You can also, you don't have to remember this, because once you've done it once, you create an action that does this. So now I've got a gradient set up over the picture. Now I go to this hue and jam it over to one side or the other. It doesn't matter. I've done it. I got my channel swap. Okay. So I just put that. I don't know how it works. Great. Don't look at me like that. But it works.
Just do it.
Just do it. So once you've done that, you say, "Hey, I want to keep that. Create one of these presets here." Okay. So the way I do my processing is pretty simple for this picture here. Let me reset the thing back to the beginning. I start off by picking one of their little profiles, right? I say okay, close that. Then I might color balance here. I can color balance later. Okay, now it's color balance. Then I've set up a preset set here called IR gradient channel swap. Done. Okay. So I just created a preset out of that channel swap idea for the gradient. Yeah. Yes. So now of course you go and you start doing the regular edits in here to increase contrast and the ones I always like. I always like dehaze, like I said before, a little bit. But if you don't want to do the dehaze, well, but I mean, the tone curves are cool. I mean, the tone curve here, you can take this tone curve and slide the little tone. I like the tone curves in Photoshop a lot better, but you can do a lot with this tone curve. Yeah. Yeah. So you can play around with tone curve if you like. That's one thing. The other thing you can do is dehaze is nice for some reason it works well in infrared, especially on skies. The other thing I'll do sometimes, this one's not a good one here. Let me go back to library. Maybe I could find one with this picture here developed. Obviously, probably not going to find this guy. I would do the same. This is a 720, so I would go find the profile, close it, get that, find something I think is neutral, like concrete in the front here, do a channel swap. Now I'm starting to get something I like, little blue in the sky. What I can do now is go to, you see it already has one mask, but that mask that I applied, which is that gradient filter, I can now say select sky. I didn't select all of it, but if it had, I could select that sky. And then what you can do there sometimes is hit the dehaze filter there. So if you like dehaze, it really works. If you can select the sky, you could select the sky using the brush tool here, but go to dehaze there and then sort of, it'll do some different things with the sky. So that's the kind of things that you can do too. Let me just go to sky, yes, sky, add, brush. Did I get a brush? I don't know if I did, but new brush. Yeah, I'm not working well with my fingers on this thing. But anyways, you get the idea. So the basic steps are always going to be in Photoshop, Autotone, Canvas, and then white balance. So it doesn't have to be exactly those orders, but just do that order. Then you everything you like to. Here it's going to be find the right profile. First download it, hit the profile, and do a white balance, and then do a channel swap, and then start it and pick out anything like you like to. But that's standard. And if you're doing JPEG, let me go back to a JPEG image. So if you're not into a lot of post processing, I'll take one of these little JPEG images down here. This one's directly. Let me see. Yeah, this is the raw one. Well, I'll start this. This has been processed. Okay, this one here. So I'm going to go to the develop. This is a JPEG image out of this little camera here. All right, my backyard. And if I'll do a reset, that's what it looked like, unprocessed. All right. So I don't have to go to profiles because there ain't no profile for JPEGs. Right? There's no. So I'll close that. All I have to do is I could hit auto if I want to. See what it does that. I could open up shadows and stuff like that if I wanted to. But I'd still have to do the channel swap if I want to get rid of the blue trees. If I want to get a blue sky. So I can do channel swap, same thing. Got the channel swap. So all they did on that was JPEG hit the channel swap. Now it's probably a little oversaturated and things like this and some stuff. So I would tone it down, make it different. But that pretty simple. Yeah. Because you can see the originals like that. Okay, and if you like yellow skies, that's good. And then if I want to, that's the channel swap. That's without the channel swap like that. Okay. If I go to a different kind, this is that's a 590 filter, which is, I think it's this one here. If I go to a JPEG 720 filter, see what that is. This one here. So this is the JPEG here for 720 filter. If I reset that one, it came in looking like that. Okay. So what I would want to do if I did a channel swap, that's the color I want. Now, I probably obviously want to do some other things. I do auto tone. I mean, I do the auto. I might bring up the shadows. In this particular one, I was sitting there late afternoon. The sun, terrible, terrible light. But I could, the shadows already opened up quite a bit. So this isn't a good picture, but it's okay. You got the idea. Open that up a little bit more. I may then go to the channel swap. I start to get the look I want, you know? So it's so in the JPEG, all you're really doing is channel swapping and white balancing. And that's it. And of course, everything else you do with the picture. Well, the other things you can do too, if you know how the HSL slider works, that sky is sort of teal or purple color, the way it came out here. So I can go down to the HSL slider here, take my little, just click on hue, take this little picker here, and then play around with the color of the sky, see if I can come up with a different color. You know, I may not come out very good on this one, bad light. But anyways, that's I can change the color of the sky that way. Luminance, make the sky dark. Oh, look at that! Look at the trees started yellow. Anyways, there's some good things you can do. But that's the idea. For, you know, I would recommend. I mean, I've gone to Lightroom a lot now because it's so simple. You know, you have to download the profile, so that's about it. His profiles are pretty amazing. But once you've done that, I think you're pretty good shape. No, they're free. I don't know why he does this stuff. He does a lot of. He just does that. He has hundreds of profiles out there for different cameras. And he even says, if you have a camera that's not on my list, send me a raw. He uses the raw picture to create the profile, and he uses an Adobe product, which is a profile creator product. You can get it yourself. You can actually, he even shows you how to do it with Adobe product if you wanted to, but he does it already. He has it. I've downloaded. Let's see if I even have it in the downloads folder. I'll probably do. Let's see, downloads. Here we go, infrared profile pack. The iPhone 14, see? There's profile packs for that. There's a M8. So you can go down here, you can see all the different cameras he has here. All you have to do is find your camera. And if you can't, he'll make one for you. He will. And so there's all the Nikons, Olympuses. And all you have to do is figure out which ones of these you want. For example, if I've been going down to Sony here, Sony RX, I've got a Sony DSLRs. So you just, yeah. Okay. Anyways. Okay, so we'll shut down. But you just pick the ones you want, and then you go to Lightroom and load them in, like I showed you. Go to that. And then you got them. You just one click at that point. Okay. He even makes profiles where he combines the camera profile and the channel swap into one thing. So it's a one-click everything. He has some of those too. So that is really super simple. Okay. Oh yeah. Well, the fact that he does that, and that if you don't find your camera on the list, you can send him a raw file from your camera. He'll do it. So anyways, highly recommend it, guys. And thank you for coming. Yeah, and go to YouTube, okay? Go to YouTube and look at his stuff, okay? And yeah, and I will send you guys a PDF of this presentation, okay? Thank you very, very much. Thanks a lot. And
Really
Kathy, hey Kathy, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Kathy.
No, thank you. It was very informative. I enjoyed it.
Okay, good deal. We ignored you out there, but thank you very much.
No, you were right there with me. I appreciate.
Okay, thanks a lot. Take care. All right.
Bye.
See you guys. Kathy Doyle.
For making it.